So this next demo is a full demo on the ball bounce process. What I've done is recorded myself thinking through and doing the ball bounce. I think it's interesting and important to watch someone's thought process because animation has a very idiosyncratic hierarchy to its thinking. And I just wanted to share with you what goes on in my brain as it's happening. So the following demo isn't edited. It's just me working on the computer, making a ball bounce. If you have any questions, send me an email. So you'll be doing 3 balls in one frame. After this tutorial, I'll add one other quick one to show you how to render something out and turn it into a movie file. Okay, let's start our ball bounce. The first thing I'm going to do is make a background for our ball. The staging is always important. It gives context for our animation. I'm going to make a new solid, and I'm going to make it dark gray. And then I'm going to make another solid and make this one even darker gray. I'm going to take the really dark gray one on top, scale it down, and move it to the bottom. Look at that, a handy dandy ground plane ready to go. I'm going to lock these because we're not going to need to manipulate them anymore, and I'm going to make them shy so they disappear from the timeline and won't clutter up the work. Okay, the next thing we need is, yes, you guessed it, another solid. New solid. And for this one, we're going to make it a nice bright color. How about a nice deep yellow? That looks really good. And hit OK. And then just for thrills and whistles, I'm going to make the layer itself yellow, just so I can keep track of what's going on with this particular ball. Alright, now I'm gonna create a mask on top of this yellow solid under my rectangle tool. Remember, it hides many delights. Use the ellipse tool, hold shift, and draw out a sphere. Well, it's not a sphere, it's a circle. Alright, that looks good. And now I'm going to adjust my anchor point. Zoom out a little bit. And there's my anchor point. I'm using the anchor point pan behind tool. And I'm just going to move it to the center. I'm going to turn on snapping for right now so I can get the very center of the ball lined up. Now I can get the very center of the ball lined up with the anchor point. Very good. And now I'm going to turn off snapping because it's going to hinder us if we have it on. I'm going to zoom out of the composition, zoom out of the composition, and let's find the starting position for our ball. We're going to need the move tool, which is V, and we're going to start the first ball just up in the corner here. Okay, so now what we do is we rough in the basic movement of the ball. And we do that by using the position modifier. Turn the modifier on, turn the stopwatch on, set the keyframe, and then how long will it take for this ball to bounce across the screen? 1002, 1003, 1000. I'm going to set it to 4 seconds just to be safe. And then I'm going to the ball is going to end here. I'm going to make the center of the ball match up with the ground plane, just so I can have an easy way to keep track of where the ball is and be consistent about it. Okay, so how long does it take for the ball to drop down the first time? Does it take 1 second? Well, let's rough that in and find out. We're going to bounce right here. Okay, and then we're going to move on. And how long does it take to bounce back up again? Wow. Approximately a little less than 2 seconds. And then it has to bounce down again. This would go a little quicker. I'm going to drag these a little closer together. Adjust these anchor points. And move that in. And let's find the next peak. Make the next peak about here. And the next valley here. I'm going to have to zoom in my timeline. And I think the next peak will be about here. And the next valley about here. Adjust this a little bit. This seems to be a little too wide. And I'm just using my imagination, thinking about how a ball would bounce in space. My friend is asking me, would I like pink or purple sand for our sand animation project? I think I'm going to go purple. Anyway, let's set the work area to 5 seconds and preview. Okay, this ball is moving way too slowly. So we need to adjust this second keyframe, and we're going to drag it in. And as we drag, notice that the interpolation is going to, not going to increase, it's going to decrease because it'll be going faster. Okay. And then we probably need to do the same for this peak. My guess is the valley is going to need some adjustment too. Then the next peak, slide that down. And the next valley, slide that down. The next valley, so forth. That's not too bad. That's still a bit slow. I'm going to show you a cool trick. That's it. I'm going to show you a cool trick to make the keyframes rove against time, which means you can lengthen or shorten all of the keyframes at once. Select them all, right-click, rove across time. Then, if I think this is going too slow, I can just adjust the last. Then I can deselect, select the last keyframe, and move the entire thing down. And then I don't have to individually adjust every keyframe. Then I can right-click again, and so then I can select them, right-click again, and turn off Rove Across Time. Now let's see how this thing works. Shorten the play area. Okay, that's looking a little more naturalistic. When you come out of Rove Across Time, it looks like After Effects is going to interpolate for you some eases. These aren't the eases you want. So what we're going to do is select them and turn them back into regular keyframes. So what we're going to do is select them, hold the command button, and click them so they turn back into regular keyframes, because we want to control the ease in and ease outs. Okay. Now I want to give the ball a sense of gravity, and I'm going to be able to do that with eases. Eases are going to give us the illusion of gravity taking hold of the ball. So here's a really quick and easy way to get started with that. I can select the keyframe, right-click, Keyframe Assistant, and ease out. I'm easing out of this thing. So as you see, in the keyframes here, in the tweens, they're a little closer together here and further apart here. So let's see what that looks like as it falls. And it's looking a little more natural, isn't it? Okay, so we are going to do that for all of the peaks. Keyframe Assistant, ease out. No, ease in. We want to ease out. And we want to Keyframe Assistant, ease out. And we want to Keyframe Assistant, ease out. Let's take a look at our graph editor real quick and see what that looks like. Let's open the graph editor and make sure I'm on the speed graph. Zoom in. Alright, this is looking pretty good. We've got these nice arcs in time at the top of our apex, at the apex of our bounces. Let's play it. Open up my preview a little bit more so you can see the relationship between the ball and the graph editor. So it looks kind of like the energy is slowing down. I'm going to go back And then I'm going to go into my valleys. And I'm going to give the valley keyframe assistant an easy ease. That's an ease in and an ease out. Let's take a look at the graph. Oh, that is starting to actually look like a bouncing ball. Let's give it a test. Okay. Looks like this area here is moving a bit slow, so we're going to fix that by moving the keyframes closer together. Adjusting the valley and peak so it looks a little more natural. Okay. Move this last part down, give it a few more frames so I can make it roll out of the frame. Oh, that's looking real good. This peak here is too fast. So I'm going to slow that down a little bit, add some more frames in it. Now, let's get some squash and stretch happening. So, I'm going to push Shift S for scale. And I'm also going to need rotation, Shift R. So I'm imagining as the ball falls down into the valley, it's going to pick up some speed and start stretching. So I think I'll start the stretch not at the apex, but at the frame after the apex. Then I'm going to put a scale modifier there, a scale keyframe. I'm going to uncheck the constrain proportions and stretch her out a little bit. Now you'll see that, no, I tell a lie, undo. Now I'm going to want to make the ball fall into the valley, and as it falls it's going to stretch. So as it's picking up speed, it's going to elongate. I don't want to add the keyframe for stretch at the top of them, at the peak. I'm going to want to do it, start it maybe a frame or two down. So I'm going to add my scale keyframe, uncheck the constraint proportions, and then modify the Y to stretch it out just a little bit. There we go. I keep doing this wrong. And then it's going to stretch and elongate until it comes to about here, one frame before the valley. And then I'm going to scale it to stretch it out. And I'm also going to rotate it to make sure it feels like the ball is moving in the right direction. And as it moves down into the valley, it's stretching. Let's see how that looks. Okay, we got a lot of work to do still yet. So we see the stretch here. The stretch ends here. And now at the valley, we want to squash it. So what we're going to do is just move one frame forward right before the valley. Add a keyframe for scale. So it moves from this elongated position into a more squashed position for the next frame. Now we're gonna unsquash it. And we also want to make sure the rotation for this is 0. So we'll move one keyframe back, turn on the rotation, move one frame forward, and tell it from this frame to this frame to turn back to 0. So now we have a nice splat. I think that needs to be squished. I'm remembering how Stimpy jumped in and his whole body just kind of squished down. So I'm going to do that with scale. I'm going to modify the Y proportions into a squish. Let's see how that works. And I'm going to want to move the bottom of the squish down to about here to make it look realistic. So I'm going to have to just slightly bring down the position. So when I go back and forth, looks like it needs to go a little further. It looks like the ground plane isn't moving. We've got our squish. Now we're going to need another stretch for this part of the arc. Now here, I want to make these peaks a little more naturalistic. And I don't want them to be sharp because nothing in nature really moves in sharp angles. It always moves on a natural arc. So I'm going to go up here and select my convex vertex tool, my convert vertex tool, and I'm going to click and I'm going to just drag this out a little bit and smooth out this sharp point into an arc. I'm going to do the same for all of my peaks. Smooth it out. So the motion looks a little more naturalistic there. Okay, now we have to go back and make our ball stretch. So here is our valley point. We're going to move forward and set a keyframe. And here's our valley point. And then we're going to move up a couple of frames. And we're going to stretch it. Now, here's a cool trick. You can copy keyframes with their values. So I want to keep this stretch proportion here. I'm going to copy this keyframe, copy it, Control C, and then paste it. So then it's bouncing down and then bouncing back up. But I have to make sure that it's rotating in the right direction. So I'm going to add a rotation keyframe here. And preview. Looks like my rotation is a little funky up here. I must have accidentally deleted my rotation keyframe. So I'm going to add another keyframe in there and rotate it into the correct position. Okay, I've got a problem here. This looks funky. And it's because I put my keyframes in strange places. So I'm going to hit my scale, set a new keyframe at the beginning, and make that one perfectly round. And then, let's see. I want to keep the roundness for a couple of frames. There we go. And we need to fix the rotation. There. Rotating. And right before the valley, we need another rotation keyframe to get it into the right position, the right angle. This keyframe should be the same as this keyframe. So we'll copy, paste. Well, this is totally whack. So I'm just going to delete all these extra scale and rotation keyframes and start over. Okay, I have the ball coming in. As it's moving down, it's squashing. As the ball is coming in, it's stretching. Good. And then at the valley, I want it to squish. So the key keyframe before, I'm going to keyframe right before the valley. Tell it this is where I want to start the rotation. And in the valley, this is where I want the rotation to end. So it's squished. So then we get this nice instant boink there. And then directly next frame, I'm going to rotate it up. And let's see what we've got. Oh, that looks really good. Got nice. Now, as the ball comes out of the valley, see, we've got a rotation here of -69. We want it as it comes out of the valley, we're going to want to scale it back to its original round shape. So we're going to add a keyframe and move forward about 2 frames before the peak and turn it round. Let's see how that looks. That's good. Okay, now it's going to stay round at the apex, and then as it picks up speed, it's going to stretch again. So I want to set a keyframe for scale here, and I'm going to 1 frame before the valley. I'm going to scale that out again to make it stretchy. And I'm also going to have to rotate it. I think I want that stretch to start happening maybe at the first frame after the apex. And then right before the apex, I'm sorry, right before the valley, we're going to set a keyframe for scale and rotation, and we're going to make that squishy looking by moving it this way. And it's probably going to have a little less squish here than it did here. So I'm just going to wrong one. I'm just going to unsquish it a little bit. Yeah. And then we just repeat the process down the line until it stops. Okay, here we have to make it round again after the second or third frame from the valley. So I'm going to select the position where I want it to start moving, scale and rotation, and then I want it to be moving in a stretchy fashion by the time it gets here. But I also want it to start inflating. So I'm going to put a scale modifier in. both of these back to 100. Boink. You know, that stretch is really crazy. Somehow that got a little too big. There we go. So by the time it gets to this frame, we're going to want to stretch it again. And rotate it. And then remember, we want it round and unrotated at the apex. So the rotation is going to be 0. And we're going to make it round again by making both the X and Y 100. That's the garbage. Now, right before the peak, because I want to have it round and untilted, I'm going to set a scale and rotation keyframe and go to the peak and make the rotation 0 and scale square. There we go. And you just keep on keeping on. I may not need this scale modifier here. I can delete that. Oh, I do need that. Scale should be squished here, and then rotated here. There we go. That looks really good. And the same thing again. Get to the peak. And we're going to do about 2 frames off the peak. And I don't think it's going to really stretch anymore because it's starting to lose energy. So let's not worry about the scaling anymore. Let's not worry about scaling anymore for traveling down into the valley. We do want a tiny little squish here. So move back 1 frame, click scale and rotation, and move forward a frame to the valley and squish it down. Squish. That may be too much of a squish. That's not a bad squish. And then we'll come out of the squish into roundness. Very subtle there. And then it's not going to squish at all here because it's totally out of energy. It's going to roll away. Extend that out so it leaves the frame. So let's see how that looks. Okay, as I watch this, it needs to move faster. So from here to here, I'd like to increase the tempo. So to do that, I just click this set of keyframes here and move it down the timeline so it speeds up. Yeah. I think we'll make this happen a little sooner too. Moves a little quicker. And as it's losing energy, it's going to take a little longer to get up to the peak. I don't need this keyframe here. You know, I think it's going to need another little bounce right in here. So let's add another peak. Very small one. And remember, we just need the convert vertex, stretch it out into a nice curve. Let's see how that looks. I think this should go a little quicker. I'm gonna move this set of keyframes just a frame or two, and you'll notice when you're trying to do timing, 1 or 2 frames makes all the difference. Yeah, I like that better. I still want, this part seems a little slow to me, so I'm gonna drag that in. Now I'm just fine-tuning it. This part is actually feeling too fast now. And this too slow. Last jump is also too slow. Which one is it? The doesn't look right. You see we have too many tweens here. Oops. Gonna use the outgoing and make that one a little quicker. Still think that apex here is too slow. Still a little sticky at the end. This is slow here. So let's speed that up. Speed that up. And a lot of this is just looking and seeing if you believe that the ball is bouncing. And if you don't, you need to modify it. Alright, I'm going to leave this here. And now it's your turn. So now, your job is to make 2 bouncing balls, each of a different density and material. So I'll get you started on a heavy one. I'm going to make this shy since we're going to consider that done. And we just go through the process again. New. Solid. I'm going to make my heavier ball a red bowling ball. Solid. And use the ellipse tool. And bowling balls are bigger, so we'll make that bigger. And then we'll move it to the top. Now, see how it's over top of the yellow ball? And since it's bigger, you can just slide it underneath, and I'll show you how to do that. Unshy the layers and make this red one underneath the yellow one. So then if they do cross paths, you'll still be able to see them. Okay, I'm going to start the ball here. And I'm going to open my... I'm going to shy out the layers I'm not using. I'm going to have my position, scale, and rotation open. And I'm just going to sketch in the motion. Turn the position on. Now, a bowling ball would fall much faster than this rubber bouncy ball. So, let's make it heavy. Uh-oh. I forgot to move my anchor point. Move my anchor point. Turn snapping on so I can get it in the middle. Okay, now move it back up to where it needs to go. Position, turn it on, and zonk. It's going to be really fast because it's super heavy. Gonk. Right. And I just want it to have the tiniest amount of bounce. just the tiniest amount. Because the ball is so heavy. And then it's going to roll right out of the frame slowly. Okay, now here is an interesting dilemma. My little ball is being eclipsed by the big ball, and that's because of my layer positions. So I'm going to go to the unshy things and slide the red layer underneath the yellow layer. And then as you see, if they cross each other, the yellow smaller one will be in front. Okay, and then the bowling ball should be moving a lot slower than its friend. I'm going to even make it slower. So there's more of a contrast between the bounciness and the rigidity. Okay, now I'm going to go back in and fix my peaks and valleys. Oh, let's shy out the stuff we're not using. I'm going to zoom in. Use my convex tool. Smooth out these peaks. And see how that looks. Well, that's much better. Okay, now we got to add a sense of gravity to these things. So the first keyframe should have an ease out on it. So as it moves down, it's moving faster, okay? And then the peaks can have an easy ease on them. And this last one will have an ease in. And it's just that easy. Looks like my yellow ball doesn't make it all the way out of the frame. So let's go back and fix that. Let's open up our position, well, we don't even need to open the position modifier. We can just slide down the timeline and scooch that keyframe out of the way. Yeah, maybe we'd be safe to use the position modifier. Okay. So I want you to be creative. This is a boring example. What can you do to make your balls exciting? What can you do to make your ball bounces exciting? Can you give them a little more personality? Can you make them bounce around and interact with one another? All these things you can do are up to you and your imagination. I think I'm going to leave you with Pixar's Luxo Jr. to take a look at. I'm sure you've all seen it, but it's just a refresher on some really good squash and stretch.